morning. Welcome. Thanks, Tangy. God bless you. You can be seated. Welcome to Faith, Love, Hope Sunday. If you are a guest here today, this is the one day of the year that looks like this, and it's a very special day for us. We get to celebrate the great things that have happened through what God's doing here, and we look about the future, where we're heading, and the great things God is going to do. Lee gives her apologies, my lovely wife. She had her knee replacement late last year, and we knew that one day she'd have to get the other one done. It just happened a lot sooner than we thought, so she's on crutches right now, and she goes in for another knee replacement, not this Tuesday, but the Tuesday afterwards. So she said to say hello and wish she could have been here, and if you pray for her, that would be great. Pray for a very fast recovery, because that'll help me, all right? So that would be much appreciated. It is a Faith, Love, Hope Sunday, and before we get to this day, I sit with our church staff. We have a lot of staff at Citipointe. We've got all the teachers and admin down in the college. We've got early learning centres around the place, and we've got Red Frogs, and they've all got staff, but they're not the staff that did this. The staff that did this pledge, this giving amount, are just the church staff, operations, pastors, admin, and groundsmen. And so this week I asked them to not tell me individually, but we put down, and out of the church staff just here, they have pledged to give in Faith, Love, Hope season, listen to this, $180,074.50. Just out of the staff, pastors, they've and just to say that we're all in this, we're all a part of it, and we're all making the same sort of pledge to go forward. I'm just interested in to know who gave the 50 cents. That's what I want to know. $180,073.50. Wasn't you, Connor, was it? No, it wasn't you. All right, no one's going to admit to that anyway, 50 cents. And so it's just great to see our staff here going, you know what, we believe in what God's doing and what God's going to do. And even our staff overseas, in our rescue home in Cambodia, where we rescued trafficked girls. I got a little memo from one of the social workers there who has been working with us for a while. And she says this: I would like to share my blessing to the place that I work, all right? So she works for our She Rescue Home. She says, I know the 5% of my wage is not much. So I thought you can do better over there with my less budget. So I guess she's talking to us about upping the ante. I know there's a very small part which I can do at the time, but I see Hillary walking around trying to get money for our home. And I don't think Hillary's walking. I think she's flying, but she must appear to be walking. And she said, I love it that we're helping the Cambodian people, and I prefer this small amount from me to donate to the girls at the She Rescue Home so I also can make a difference in my nation. I thought you could set this in place and use it any part of the budget that you want. Isn't that a lovely thing to do? So everybody's involved when we talk about changing the world, and every little bit makes a difference. It's never about how much, it's about that we're involved. So that's just great to hear. At the end of the service, like Pastor Chris said, we're going to get you to come forward. You can give online as well. And again, you can do tax deductible online or non-tax deductible, and you work out the best way it works for you, and just be a part of what God's doing. But before we get to that, I want to speak to you on the subject of generosity, the pathway to influence. Generosity, the pathway to influence. We're going to start reading out of the book of Mark, chapter 16, verse 17, because I do believe the book of Mark is the most significant book in the Bible. All right? Book of Mark, chapter 16, verse 17, and it says this: and these signs will follow those who believe. And these signs will follow those who believe. Let me stretch that out a little bit. Whatever you believe, the signs of that believing follow you. Whatever you believe. I can tell you what you believe, not by what you say, but the signs around your life. And if you want to change the signs around your life, you first got to change an inner belief something. As a matter of fact, you really know what you believe by not what you think, not by what you hope, or by what you wish, but what you see, the signs of your life. And in life, you don't get what you want, you get what you believe. That's how it works. You don't get what you want, you get what you believe in here. Right believing equals right signs. So today I want to talk about generosity believing, because generosity, I believe, is the pathway to influence, it's the pathway to breakthrough, it's the pathway to blessing. It changes the world, it keeps me in charge, it keeps me in a good spot, and it brings blessing and influence to people around me. Think about it. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. The only way God could save us from ourselves was generosity. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Whoever believed in him would not perish, but would have everlasting life. So everything we base the gospel on is due to the generosity of God. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And our lives, I believe, should be a reflection of God's ways. A lifestyle of intentional, purposeful generosity. Not just stuck in a mad moment or emotional minute of compassion, but a lifestyle of generosity. I believe we are called to live more like him, and he is a generous God. As a matter of fact, God is generous to the core. He cannot help himself. He is generosity on steroids. He is God, and we could put a name next to him, Generosity God. He is a generous spirit, and he always does generous things. Look at Psalm 51, verse 12. Did you realize the reason we all got up this morning is because of the generosity of God? The reason everything stays in place is that if God withdraws his generosity, everything implodes. Psalm 51:12 says, "Rejoice to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me by your generous spirit." God upholds everything by his generosity. You will notice with God, it's not life limited, it's life eternal. It's not life miserable, it's life abundant. He's not El Cheapo, he is El Shaddai. He is the God of more than enough. And again, another fascinating thing in the Bible is that we've got this season back in the day when Jesus is growing up in a family, he becomes a carpenter, and then it's his time to show the world who he really is, that he's the Son of God, that he's the one from heaven that will change the world. And I find it, again, fascinating that of all the ways he could have started his ministry, the things he could have done, like his first miracle could have been a healing miracle. It could have been a deliverance miracle. God could have showed the world that he was a powerful God. But he didn't go that way. God decided to show the world that he was a generous God. Because the first miracle that Jesus performs is not a healing miracle. It's not a deliverance miracle. It is a generosity miracle. If you know the story, he's at his friend's wedding and they run out of wine. And again, my mind goes to it, and then they're stuck. They're out of wine, and somebody says, "Look, I don't know. Maybe there's whispers about Jesus. Maybe Jesus was practicing miracles at home, and somebody spotted him. I'm not sure, but there must have been whispers because they realized they could go to Jesus and something would happen. So they went to Jesus and said, "We're out of wine. Can you do something?" He said, "Bring the urns to me full of water." He blesses them, and it turns into wine. And you know that if you're Jesus, you cannot put cheap wine in the urns. I reckon it all came from the Barossa Valley. It was top-class wine. And then he goes on, a miracle takes place. Everybody's astounded, not at the power of God, but at the love of God, the generosity of God. This is Jesus, the Son of God, and he wants to show us first, above all things, his generosity. I don't know how much of that wine was drunk at the party or the reception, but I have this feeling there's a whole lot of it left, and I reckon the bridegroom and the bride sold it the next day and bought their first house, but I can't prove that. That's according to the other book of Mark. God can't help himself. He is generous to the very core. And I believe great Christianity is characterized by great generosity. It's our pathway to influence, to breakthrough, to blessing. One of my favorite scriptures in the Bible is Isaiah 32, verse 8. It says this, "But a generous man and woman devises generous things, and by generosity he shall stand." So a generous man is considering generous things all the time, and we underestimate the spiritual power of generosity. One of the greatest weapons against the darkness and the devil is your generosity, because by your generosity you shall stand. It pushes darkness away. It keeps the devil at bay. It keeps evil away from us. Generosity is a spiritual weapon against darkness. But it goes on to talk about that it's a lifestyle. That generous people are thinking about how to be generous. It's not an emotional, mad flurry of giving. It's planned. It's intentional. It's purposeful. It's a lifestyle. I've got a really good friend. We've been friends for 25 years now. and he lives in Sydney. And he told me the story that when he was 18, he just finished his apprenticeship as a plumber. And he'd always been in church. And at 18, he felt that he wanted to one day give $1 million and at one time to his church. $1 million check, $1 million amount one day. And that was his plan. So he planned that all through his working life that he would get to the point in business that he would one day get and give $1 million to his church. And just before COVID, he let me know that that was the day that he was able to write $1 million check and give it to his church in Sydney. And of course, I'm trying to persuade him to move to Brisbane. I keep telling him we're really good friends. Why don't you come to my church? But it wasn't an emotional flurry. He'd planned this thing. Generous people devise generous plans. They're considering the future. They're thinking about things. And even, it's not just an action. Generous people, you can do it. You can be generous with a smile. You can be generous with your encouragement. You can be a helping hand to somebody. You can be serving God's purposes or giving him finances. It's the same thing. It's an attitude of how can I make a difference? How can somebody else be better off because I'm around? And I know this, there is always an opportunity. The question I have for people is, are they ready for the opportunity and do they see the opportunity? Are they ready? I try and put myself in a ready position to help people out. In other words, what I do is I know it's not long gone out of being popular, but I carry cash in my wallet, not to spend for myself, but I can be generous to people. It's really hard to be generous with a debit card. There's my card, my PIN number is 7463. Don't write it down, it's not true. So I carry cash because I feel that I can, if God speaks to me, I can be able to do something and move. I was in a bank, in a queue a number of years ago, waiting for my turn at the teller, and this lady in front of me, two in front of me, she was there crying, and she's saying, look, I work at the shopping mall here. My car's out of petrol. I have no fuel to get home. My phone battery is flat. I can't call anybody. And all I want to do is borrow $50. I'll bring it back tomorrow. and you know how big-hearted banks are. There was no chance. She was getting $50. And I heard this and I turned around and I said, hey, look, I can give you $50. It's all good. She said, really? I said, yeah, it's fine. And she said, I don't want you to give it to me. I want to lend it off you. I said, no, I don't want you to lend it off me. I don't want you to borrow it. I just want to give it to you. She said, no, I can't do that. I said, what do you mean you can't do that? I don't want you to give it. And we had a fight in the bank about giving money to the $50. And finally I said, all right, here's my name and my telephone number. When you want to give the $50 back, go right ahead. I still haven't received that call. And I didn't want the money back. But I trust God. And you know what happened first service? First service, I was sharing this story. Somebody got up out of their seat, walked to the front, and gave me $50. I believe in sowing and reaping. And if you're feeling the same way, go right ahead. But you've got to live in that place where, are you ready for generosity and do you see it? Two things, are you ready or do you see it? Another time, a family was walking into church and I was saying hello to them, had a couple of kids. One of the young boys was about 5 or 6 and I leant down and said, hey, how you doing, buddy? And he said, oh, good, Pastor Mark. And he said, he was really happy. I said, what's up? And he said, my tooth fell out and the tooth fairy is going to give me $2. And he was like, man. And I'm thinking to myself, listening to him, going, you know what? I'm never going to be outdone by a tooth fairy. So I said, $2. I said, I'll give you $20 for that tooth. He looked at me with the biggest, gummiest smile you've ever seen. He handed that tooth over. I gave him $20. He became my best disciple. He would drag his parents to church. He said, you know what? Who gives a rip about tooth fairies? He says, the house of God is where the blessing is. As a matter of fact, he went home that afternoon. Greatest honor that any person could ever have. He went home that afternoon. He renamed his teddy bear to Pastor Mark. What greater honor is there on the planet? $20. Well, actually, it's not exactly true. The word got out. I think it cost me about $400. I still have a jar full of teeth in my office. But again, generosity is, do you see it? Are you ready for it? Generosity is an attitude. It's thought about. It's a thinking in your life. It's God's way of doing life. Generous people pray generously. They worship generously. They encourage generously. A generous crowd responds to good preaching. Half a good crowd responds to generous preaching. Generosity is an attitude of your heart, and it makes a difference in the world around you. I'll look at two major characteristics of a generous spirit. Number one is that a generous spirit sees possibility. A generous spirit sees possibility. Generous people are optimists. They're faith people. They see possibility. They see new beginnings when others see impossibility or an end. They are not discouraged or thrown by setbacks or disappointments or problems. They see them not as walls, but as stepping stones. They see things differently because they have a generous heart. Remember the Prime Minister of England, Winston Churchill, during the Second World War, made one of the most famous speeches in history. And it was a very simple speech. It was, never, 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 never. Went on for quite a while with never, 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 never give up. That was his speech. Changed the world. And actually, he's actually known for a lot of quips and things like that. There was one time at a party, a lady came up to him and she said, "Mr. Churchill, you're drunk." And he looked at her and said, "Madam, and you're ugly. But I will be sober in the morning." Another time a lady came up to him and said, "Mr. Churchill, if you were my husband, I'd put poison in your tea." She said, "Madam, if I was your husband, I would drink it." Now, where I'm leading up to, this is what's important about what he said. You make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give. A sense of generosity. Generous people have that ability to rejoice in the things they do have rather than complain about the things they don't have. And this is really important because they see things differently. Too many people are worried about what they don't have rather than seeing what they do have is enough, if used properly, to take them into their future. Generous people see what they have is enough because a generous spirit knows that whatever they have already is enough. It's a start. It might not be a lot, but it's a starting point. If used properly, it can take them into their future. And I think it's so significant for believers not to worry about what we don't have. It's to look at what we do have and trust God to do something with what we do have. And you watch him unfold the greatness of that. Look, 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 3 says this, "And his divine power," now it does not say, "is going to give us all things." Right? It doesn't say that. It says, "As his divine power has given us to all things." He's already given everything you need. He's given you already that pertain to life and to godliness through the knowledge of him who called us by his glory and virtue. So right now we can tell scripturally that everything we need has been given to us. What you need to move into your future, you have. It will depend on what you do with it. It will depend on how you see it and what's going to happen. God has given us enough to prosper, to do well, to increase, to overcome. It might not be a lot, don't get me wrong, but it's enough. It's a seed and that can be done, planted, and God can use it in a powerful way. It's just a matter of what we do with it. Generous people see what they have and they know that if it's sown, if it's invested, if it's placed in the right places, God can use it and he can see increase and breakthrough in their life and the lives around them. But if we keep it, buried it, it loses value and has very little power. So a generous spirit is always looking and seeing God opportunities to be generous. Let me explain how that works. You see what you look for. You look for what is important to you. And what you look for is determined by what you believe. So depending on your believing is what you'll look for, and what you look for, you will see. If you're not looking for it, you won't see it. If you love coffee shops, you will see coffee shops. Whatever's important to you, you will see. If it's not important to you, you won't see it. Like, I was in New Zealand preaching, and after the meeting, the pastor said, would you like to get some lunch? I said, yeah, that'd be great. And he said, what sort of food do you like? And I said, Japanese food would be awesome. He said, oh man, I don't know a Japanese place in the whole area. Anyway, he said, we'll have a look afterwards. I said, all right. We're driving out of the church, and straight across the road, there's a Japanese place. Right there, right as you drive out, a big sushi place. I said, there's one right here. He said, I've been here 10 years. I've never seen that. Because why? You only see what you look for, and you only look for what's important to you. You won't see generosity moments because you're not looking for them because they're not important to you. We need to work out what's important, then you'll see it, then you'll be able to act upon it. Generous people believe, so they look, they find opportunity, they see possibility. For with God, nothing is impossible. The second thing I believe a generous spirit has is that they see beyond themselves. Not just opportunity, they see others really well. They see the future. And because of this, they invest into others and the future. Generous people know that what they give is never lost. They understand this principle. What you give unto God is never lost. It just leaves your present, ends up in your future multiplied, and on the way through it changes lives. Generous people understand this principle. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 9 and 10. As it is written, biblically, he has dispersed abroad. He's given to the poor. He's made a difference. He's generous. His righteousness endures forever. Now may he who supplied seed to the sower, capital H. So we're talking about God. Now may God, who does what? God supplies seed to the sower, and he supplies bread for food. Supply and multiply the seed you have sown and increase the fruits of your righteousness. Everything in life has a bread component and a seed component. Our gifts and talents, our time, our treasure, our bread, we read it, our bread is for ourselves. God is a generous God. Here, be blessed, have all this. All he's saying to us is there's two parts. There's seed and bread. Eat your bread, just don't eat your seed. The seed is meant to be planted so it can be invested into the future for other people to be benefited by. So he's a generous God. Have your bread, but don't eat your seed. Sow your seed. Our responsibility is invest now for the sake of the next generation. You know, I think as I get older, how sad it would be that everything my age group had prayed and worked hard for died out with us. I think there's got to be a sense of legacy as we get older. There's no longer just about us. It's got to be the next generation coming through. I think it's important as you get older that you realize you're no longer the main character in your book. You become the support player to make others famous, others successful. Put them in position so they have a great and better future. We arrived here at Citipointe 24 years ago. This building did not look like this. And what we're in today is because of the generosity of believers. Everything you see church-wise is just generous people. And when I got here, there was no air conditioning in the building. You will take it for granted. I am so tempted one Sunday morning in summer to turn it off, to take us back to the old days. Remember the good old days? No, don't take us back to the good old days. No, man, you'd die in this building in summer. No one brought their friends because they wanted to keep them as their friends. You would turn into a block. It was that hot in here. It was like an oven. And in winter, it turned into a popsicle. I mean, it was so hot and so cold. And so I said, one of my first things, actually it was our first Faith, Love, Hope Sunday. First faith love, hope offering was to get air conditioning in this building. Back in the day, we used to give out news bulletins. No one read them, they just fanned themselves with them. That was their idea. And so we need to get air conditioning, not just for us, but for this is 24 years ago, but for the thousands of people that are going to come through these doors in the next 24 years. And already we've seen over 10,000 people born again in the last 24 years in this church. We're going to put air conditioning in so you can bring your friends. It's going to be okay. They're going to be okay. They're not going to melt on the ground next to you. They're not going to freeze to death. And as I'm saying all this and we're getting ready to take the offering up next Sunday, a guy comes to me after church and he says, Pastor Mark, I heard what you said. I so believe that we need to get this building air conditioned. He said, I want to pay for the whole lot. He said, I said, you sure? I mean, it's $780,000. I mean, this is not just a split unit on the wall here. It's $780,000. And he said, yeah, I want to pay for that. I want to pay for the whole lot. He says, there's one condition. I went, oh, a condition. I said, all right, what's your condition? And he said, you must never tell anybody who gave this money for this project. And I'm going to tell you, 24 years later, he is as wealthy as he still was back then. He is a blessed man. He's not poor because he gave that money, and has changed the lives of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. That you and I just take it for granted. Just take it for granted. Well, the good news is, sort of, the air conditioning is 24 years old. So I sort of guess it's bad news. And it's starting to die on us bit by bit. And a part of our faith, love, hope this year will go towards, making sure that our friends don't fry in summer or get popsicle in winter. And we're going to upgrade the air conditioning. And so a part of what we're going to do is that, all right? And again, all the projects you're going to see about what we're doing for the building, which a lot of them are, is not because of just us. It's because in the next 24 years, how many thousands upon thousands upon thousands of new people are going to walk in these doors and find Jesus. It's all about the future. 24 years ago, sowed 780,000. He's not poor because of it, but others are blessed. The future's better because of people's generosity. The kingdom advances generationally. Like I said, our generation's got to see that we need to put something in the ground, a stake here. We're going to make sure that our ceilings are the next generation's floor. They're starting at a stronger position than we did. We need to do what it takes to strengthen them for the purposes of God, for the next generation to move in from here to the future and beyond and beyond. It's almost like the church is in a giant relay race from generation to generation. And if we do it properly, we pass the baton to the next generation in a stronger position than we were given it the one before. And I love how Hebrews describes this picture of this giant relay race. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. I've got this picture of heaven of a giant arena where all the saints that have gone before us are sort of sitting in it and cheering the generations on, and they're cheering this generation on right now. And they're going, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. And as we run that race with endurance, we get to pass the baton to the next generation, getting stronger from one generation to the next. So generous people, as I sum up today, generous people see possibility. Generous people see opportunity. They see others. They see beyond themselves. So they devise generous plans to give, to be generous, advancing God's kingdom and purpose. And be assured, I don't know what you think about the world today, but I am having a lot of trouble trusting politicians. I'm having a lot of trouble trusting politics. And until COVID, I used to trust science, but I don't even trust science anymore. I find it hard to trust anything. I've decided the only thing I can put my trust in is the one who will be the same yesterday, today, and forevermore, and his name is Jesus. And the answer for every human being is not science or politics, though we've got to have them. It is Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And we as a church must get that story out there because no one else will. We are called by God. I mean, I see Australians, man, they're good at giving to, calamity and droughts and floods. They're a generous nation, but no one will invest into the gospel except Jesus' people himself. That's you and I, our calling to bring Jesus to our generation, for it is the greatest need on the planet today. They devise generous plans. What do we plan to be like God? Be generous. He upholds us by his generous spirit. We uphold others by our generous spirit. That's why we come around Faith, Love, Hope to make an incredible difference here, now, and into the future.